You have been told that Israel wants to save the hostages. Captured on October 7th. But what if you've been lied to? What if Israel's war cabinet has no intention of saving them? An investigative journalist made a bombshell discovery. Filmmaker and journalist Dan Cohen acquired secret recordings of the Netanyahu government pressuring Israeli families to sacrifice their children in Gaza in order for the genocide to continue, so that Israel can conquer and colonize Gaza for good. Stick around, because I'm about to reveal the sickening details of this explosive investigation that confirms Israel's policy of sacrificing their own people. And you'll be surprised to hear that this theory is supported by prominent Israelis and has been reported by Israeli media. Yes, you heard that right. Israeli media. Now, I'm sure you've heard about the controversial Hannibal Directive, which is the Israeli doctrine of killing their own people to prevent the Palestinians from using them as bargaining chips during negotiations and prisoner swaps. The Hannibal Directive is a doctrine of sacrifice named after the Carthaginian general, who was one of the single greatest threats to Rome to ever live. For years, Hannibal delivered blow after humiliating blow to the Roman Empire. And even after the fall of Carthage, Hannibal swore an oath of revenge. So the Romans chased Hannibal across the world, hoping to capture him. But when they got close to doing just that, Hannibal decided he would rather die than allow himself to be captured, and so swallowed a vial of poison that he always kept with him just for such a situation. Israel sees killing its own citizens in much the same way, so as to deny their enemies any leverage during negotiations. Now, while it was speculated by many in the aftermath of October 7th that Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive, it has now become crystal clear, even irrefutable through Israeli media no less, that Israel had done exactly that.
נוהל חניבל כנראה הופעל באיזשהו שלב, כי ברגע שהבינו שיש חטיפה, אז הם מיד אומרים, חבר'ה, זה חניבל.
But what if I told you this mass Hannibal is still happening? That it has been happening every day since October 7th? What if I told you that a major aim of the genocide in Gaza was in fact the continuation of this mass Hannibal? On January 15th, the Palestinians released a video of Israeli hostage Noah Argamani. Noah says that she had been injured in an Israeli airstrike and was trapped under the rubble for 2 whole days. She also says that 2 other Israeli hostages had been killed by Israeli strikes, one buried underneath the rubble and the other in a moving ambulance in Gaza. She implored Netanyahu to stop this madness and bring us home to our families. But these aren't the only Israeli hostages who have been killed or injured. According to Hamas, nearly 60 hostages have been killed by Israeli strikes. Several Israeli hostages released by Hamas have described the terror of being held in Gaza, unsure of whether or not they'd be killed by their own government.
את כל הפיצוצים של ישראל, פיצוצים מאוד גדולים. היה המון פעמים שאמרתי לעצמי, בסוף אני ימות מהטילים של ישראל ולא מהחמאס.
An Israeli sociologist and military expert, Yagil Levy, told the Israeli newspaper Haaretz that Israel is indeed trying to carry out a mass Hannibal. The government's decision to attack Gaza, despite the presence of hostages in the bombed sites, can be considered an extension of the Hannibal procedure. That is, an attempt to thwart the continuation of the captivity, even at the cost of risking the lives of the hostages. The obvious explanation is that the right perceives the pressure to stop the fighting as endangering the pursuit of victory and revenge in Gaza. And therefore, the lives of the abductees are another reasonable sacrifice that must be made. A reasonable and necessary sacrifice to justify the Gaza genocide. Gilad Shalit was a captured Israeli soldier that the Palestinians traded for over 1,000 Palestinians. In an interview with the Israeli media outlet Shomrim, an unnamed figure who was involved in the Gilad Shalit exchange said that Israel was invoking the Hannibal Directive. He says, Hamas expected this to be a repeat of the Shalit case. They thought that they would kidnap Israelis and that we would cave in. But the state of Israel has implemented the Hannibal Directive on the whole of the Gaza Strip. Now, as you can imagine, the families of the hostages are not happy about this. They want their loved ones to be brought home. They're angry and they have been organizing massive demonstrations, calling on Netanyahu to strike a deal and end the war, to save their loved ones, and live up to their promise of bringing them home, which was supposedly a key objective for Israel in this war. And some of the demonstrators are former hostages themselves. And so Netanyahu has been gaslighting the families of these hostages to convince them to sacrifice their own children so that he can achieve his political ambition of conquering Gaza and ethnically cleansing the Palestinians from it. You see, to Netanyahu and his cabinet, the families of the hostages are nothing but an obstacle that stands in the way of Israel's genocide in Gaza. But more importantly to him, they are endangering his political career. In a private meeting between Netanyahu and the family of the hostages, several far right-wing extremists whose family members were also taken hostage were brought in to try and convince everyone else that their pain should be set aside for the greater interests of the Israeli state. One of these far right-wing extremists, Ohad Zvi Lapidot, addressed the families. This is a secret audio recording of that exchange.
ברגע ההיסטורי הזה, הכאב הפרטי לא יכול לנהל אותך.
Outraged, a mother of one of the hostages responded.
What
Lapidot said next set fire to the room.
יש ראש ממשלה שהתפקיד שלו זה לראות את כלל ישראל ואת התפקיד הכללי. יש משחק שחמט, יש חיילים, ויש ממלכה.
אבל זה לא חיילים, זה לא חיילים, זה ילדים. ילדים וזקנים, קשישים.
אם אנחנו נעשה,
זה לא מלחמה, זה לא פוליטי.
Now, as you can clearly tell, there is division amongst the families. Yet, after the meeting, the far right-wing extremist family members in support of Netanyahu, sacrificing their children for conquest, went outside and spoke directly to the media, pretending to represent all of the families that had met with Netanyahu.
אני אמרתי לכולם, גם אני מאוד מאוד אוהב את הבן שלי. אבל אם אני צריך לבחור בין הבן שלי, בין אהבת הבן שלי לבין אהבת האומה, אני בוחר באהבת האומה. אנחנו נשדר את החוזק. אנחנו עכשיו נקראים לדגל, ואם צריך להקריב את הקורבן, אנחנו נקריב את הקורבן.
By dividing the families and using guilt to dissuade them from standing in his way and then lying to both the public and the media, Netanyahu seeks to maintain his position that Gaza must be completely wiped off the map. This psyop, this lie, this betrayal of the families of the hostages of the Israeli citizenry, who are nothing but pawns to Israeli leadership, is how Netanyahu has been able to convince Israeli society to continue the war. Ever since this psyop took place, Netanyahu's war cabinet has implemented a mass Hannibal policy in Gaza, wiping out their hostages and removing all obstacles to the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Palestinian people. In one case, the IDF used poison gas to kill an Israeli hostage being held in an underground tunnel. In a chilling social media post, the mother of the murdered hostage said her son crushed his fingers trying to dig his way out of the tunnel before choking to death on the poisonous gas. She rightly asks, if it were Netanyahu's son being held hostage, would the IDF have acted so recklessly? She went on to say that there is no future for this country after what they did to you. This poor mother raises an important point. What is the point of establishing a safe home for the Jews and expanding your territory through conquest for your own people if you have to murder your own people to achieve it?
החזרת החטופים לא הולך ביחד. אמרנו, הלחימה מסכנת אותם והלחימה הורגת אותם. 9 יום הוא שרד שם, בחיים, בסיוט, בזוועה, זוועת עולם. בשביל שפשוט יהרגו אותו. אומרים שהחזרת החטופים זה בראש סדרי עדיפויות. ואם לא, אז משקרים לנו כל הזמן. וזה מה שזאת האמת. פשוט משקרים לנו, מקריבים אותם, מוותרים עליהם, עליי ויתרו, לגמרי.
There is so much more in this bombshell investigation conducted by Dan Cohen, so check out the link to his article. And remember, we all know that the algorithm censors and bans content like this, so we need your help to spread the word. Support our ongoing investigations. Free Palestine.